Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Pre-Order Bonus. I'm one of your hosts, Cameron Warren, and I'm joined once again by the amazing Jacob Price. Jake, how the heck are you doing this week? It's January 26th, 2021, and video games are we're still playing them.
Still playing them. Can you believe it? I was still playing video games by the time we started recording this podcast tonight.
What were you playing right before you started doing this podcast?
I was playing Mother 3.
Really?
Yep.
Is that in English?
Let's not get into the particulars here, Cameron.
Oh, how is it?
Listen, I love a lot of it, but I'm over halfway through, and I think I like Earthbound better. But I need to finish this one before I can do like fair comparisons. I have a lot of mixed feelings.
So I've never played Mother 3, but for listeners who don't know what we're talking about, Mother 3 is the third in the Earthbound series, with the first game being Earthbound. And the only thing I know about it is I know that there's been a raging cry from Earthbound fans for the past, 30 years to bring this game to the US, and Nintendo's just never done it for some reason. Nobody knows why.
So, yeah, here's the story, right? So Mother 3 is the third in the Mother series. So sorry, I'm doing a little bit of correction here, Cameron. The first Mother game, Mother 1, I think came out in 1989 on the NES, and it was okay. Mother 2 came out in 1994 on the SNES, but it launched in North America as Earthbound.
Okay, got it.
Then Mother 3 came out for Game Boy Advance in 2006, and it was only released in Japan. So since then, and I can finally join this legion of dedicated fans who are just constantly whining to Nintendo about getting an official localization into English. So that is like, I don't know, that's a special gamer badge, I think, that you get to be one of those annoying people that asks, Nintendo executives at meet and greets this same question for going on 15 years now.
Yeah, everything you just said, that's the only thing I've ever heard about it. I've never played it. I've definitely played the first Earthbound, the one that we have that's actually in English, and it's on the virtual console, right? It's on the Switch online thing, right? Like access to it?
I don't think it is. I think its most recent re-release was on the classic SNES that came out. Remember, Nintendo only made 1,000 of them because who knows why?
Yep. Nintendo constantly doing weird things to the bafflement of their consumers. Yeah, that seems pretty par for the course.
Yeah, so that's what happened with that. So the easiest way to play it, let me backtrack. The easiest way to own it and play it is if you can get a classic SNES. I just looked on eBay, actually, because I was talking to another friend about Earthbound earlier today. I think you could snag them for $150, which I think was pretty much the retail price. So that's not so bad. And then that comes with all the other classic, SNES games as well.
Or pro tip, you could download an emulator, but you didn't hear that here. So anyway,
moving along.
Jake, this is a very special episode. You know why? Because it's the first episode with show feedback. Show feedback. That's right. We've got exactly one piece of feedback, and it's from @Freddy Go Boom. Freddy, thanks for listening, for giving us feedback. And it's a criticism of me, actually. So I'm trying to decide if I should read the whole thing here.
No, just give us a summary.
I'll give you the summary. Yeah, this is way too long. Freddy, this is like a 6-page essay on your passion for Halo. No, so we We called out Freddie, one of our listeners, and he posted to the Discord channel, which you can also do, ladies and gentlemen. If you like the podcast, if you like the content that we're putting out, the pre-order bonus Discord link is in the podcast description, or if you're watching on YouTube, it's in the description below. Come chat with us on Discord. Come give your feedback. Come recommend video games. come tell us how bad we suck at doing podcasts. That's what we want. We
love to hear it.
We need criticism right now. So anyway, on one of our on our recent episode, we talked about. I gave a prediction about Halo Infinite.
Yes.
And that prediction was that Halo Infinite will have a battle royale in 2021. And Freddie did not like that one little bit. And so, Freddie, you posted to Twitter, you called me out, and then I said, hey, why don't you post your response to your logic. I want to hear his logic. I wanted to hear his logic around why he thinks it doesn't, in fact, need a battle royale. So that's what he posted. So I'm just going to give his 2 points. I'm going to give his 2 main points here, and then I'm going to reply to what he's laid out. So number 1, this is why Halo Infinite, just to be clear to everybody, why Halo Infinite should not have a battle royale, okay? I can think of many prominent examples, this is Freddie, where a franchise tried to cater to new fans and it ends in disaster. In many of these cases, the initial reaction is actually good, but the long tail goes away. New fans are too often casual fans. Diablo 3, Halo 4, Destiny 2 come to mind immediately. I think I've argued that point enough. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, he's talking to Jake. Number 2, Halo 5 still has a large player base of hardcore fans and is still making money off its rec packs. This is hard to prove since Microsoft stopped releasing hard numbers, but we do know that rec packs, blah, blah, blah,
Oh
blah,
my
blah,
gosh.
blah. Okay.
I'm going to pull up Mother 3 again while you go through this.
So here's the thing. No, that's all. So basically, Freddie, I don't even know what this argument is. I got to be honest. You didn't give me any hard numbers. There's no data. Let's just, you know what? I'm going to give you the data because I've got it right here. I'm prepared.
Oh my gosh.
So let's talk about this for 2 seconds. So let's take Call of Duty Warzone, for example. Call of Duty Warzone is a battle royale, as you know, Jake. You're familiar with Warzone. You played it maybe once?
I've played it several times. My brother's really into it.
So the last 12 months, Call of Duty has surpassed $3 billion in net bookings. Okay? So that's one number for you, okay? That's a battle royale. That's a first-person shooter with a battle royale mode, just to be clear, okay? Bungie, in 2019, made $300 million in microtransactions. Okay, significantly less, however. Still a lot of money, right? But significantly less than than Call of Duty, okay? And, Fortnite would even need to get into that because Fortnite made around $5 billion in 2020. So that's not even comparable, not even the same ballpark. And then, Halo 5, let's see, the franchise, like the total that the franchise has generated in total, all Halo games combined, is about $5 billion, okay? So you look at the 2 biggest earners, Fortnite, Call of Duty, and you look at the multiple billions, they're in the double-digit billions in terms of revenue. Microsoft doesn't want to make Halo Infinite into Destiny. They want to make it into Warzone and Fortnite. And that's the bottom line. It's about dollars and cents. And so to me, as much as, there's a hardcore fan base, the hardcore fan base is what keeps a game like Destiny alive. But what makes the money? It's games like Fortnite. It's games like Warzone. Those games are dominating from a revenue standpoint every other game out there on the planet. Jake, any thoughts on that?
Welcome to our new podcast in which we discuss the future of Halo Infinite and Battle Royales. It's called the pre-order of Halo Infinite.
I mean, we had to respond to our show feedback, Jake. That's part of this. That's part of the show now, at least for one episode.
Oh man, this will go on in Discord, and I'll just be scrolling through.
No thoughts on that, Jake? No rebuttal? Whose
Listen.
camp? Let's just say, whose camp are you in? Are you in mine, or are you in Freddie's?
Oh, geez. Okay, this went from my opinion to picking sides.
No,
Listen.
okay. You can just give your opinion. That's fine. You don't have to pick a side. That's fine.
Listen. Here we are. Yes, to both sides. Not taking a side. No, I mean, my response to this idea is purely subjective and emotional, right?
Yeah.
For me, Halo 2 was a super important game that I played a lot as a kid, played a lot online, and I was terrible at online, but I still had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun playing with friends. And for me, Halo is very much that arena shooter. That's just what it is. And so for me, it's a totally, nostalgia factor. Do I want Halo to have a BR? I mean, not really, because that's not when I think of Halo, that's not what I think of when I think of the online multiplayer experience. But when I think about could 343 Industries make a Halo battle royale, and could they make a good one? Listen, Halo's got way more going for it in terms of like the skeleton that's there to construct a BR. Like, I don't think it would be that difficult to make a BR out of it, honestly. Weapons are relatively balanced, right? You have different play styles that could be incorporated. And so I think it's totally possible. And I don't think that they would not do it. Like, I don't think they're going to, like, out of principle say, nah, we can't make a BR out of this game. I don't think there's anything along those lines that's holding 343 and Microsoft back from making something like this. So if it happens, I won't be surprised. I'll give it a try for sure. I mean, when it comes to battle royales, I think my favorite is still Apex to this day.
Yeah.
But I think if I were to hop into a Halo battle royale, I might like it. I like Halo. I like gunplay in Halo. So that's kind of where I'm at. Like, purely emotional, nostalgic reasons, I don't really want it because I want my arena shooter back. But like in a realistic sense, it could totally happen. I don't see anything really preventing them from making one.
Yeah, let me just caveat with this because Freddie, you're not wrong. I don't think you're wrong, but what I do disagree with you on is like I think it needs to have look, if it's not a battle royale, it's got to be something new to bring in the young generation that is spending multiple billions of dollars on Fortnite. They have to steal some of that market.
Gambit from Destiny 2.
It's got to be that's probably I don't think Jake, good. It's a good thing you're not a product man. Anyway, so so let me just say this: I don't think they should remove anything from the game. I think they should still have everything that they've had in Halos of the past, so that you can have the experience that hardcore Halo fans who are still playing Halo 5, Freddie, as you mentioned, that hardcore fan base is there. Let them have that game that they want to have. I think the difference between Halo and Destiny is Halo is going to have. I mean, Halo is Microsoft's has to be successful video game. It is the key to making Game Pass work, and because Game Pass is their core strategy for making the Xbox division work as like a business unit. That is, Game Pass is everything, okay? So Microsoft knows that Halo has to be a smash hit, no question.
Yep.
And in order to be a smash hit, it's pretty much got to appeal to everybody in that first-person shooter genre. And what's big right now in that? It's Battle Royale. So I'll say this, I'll be shocked if they don't do it, because to me, it's just a business thing. That being said, I don't think they should take away anything from the hardcore. Like I said, the difference between something like Destiny and Halo, I mean, I gotta be sure that Halo has a much bigger development team and a much bigger budget. They've got Microsoft's backing. They've got, I can guarantee you, Phil Spencer has a blank check, and he's going to the Halo team, and he's like, whatever it takes, just make this the best first person shooter out there. I'm sure that's what he's saying.
I 100% agree, Cameron. I think especially since they actually decided to delay the game a full year when this was supposed to be a Series X launch title.
Right.
Like, this game better be, very shiny. It better be very polished, right?
Absolutely.
This is carrying a ton of weight on it. Microsoft is absolutely treading water between now and that launch, and don't get me wrong, they have a lot of really good exclusive games coming out. A lot of them are like AA studios, though, between now and then, right?
Yep.
They really need a lot coming out here. And Cameron, I think you're right. Halo is one of those franchises that it's gotten almost too big to control at this point. Halo's been around for 20 years. I mean, think about, I started playing Halo when Halo came out when I was 11, right? So, I mean, you have the gamers like me. I'm not a huge like diehard Halo, but I'm always interested in Halo when something comes out. you have people like me who've been playing Halo who have a lot of nostalgia with Halo, and then you have them trying to incorporate new people into the franchise. And so I think these really long running franchises, WoW, Halo, Pokemon, they're always trying to cater between hardcore veteran players and bringing in a brand new generation of gamers. And I think you're right, Cameron, in the sense that when Halo Infinite launches, there will be something for everybody, because Microsoft desperately needs it, one.
Yes.
And two, Halo is one of the few franchises that could pull that off.
And I think they have to.
Yeah. So no sweat over there. All the, Microsoft and Xbox people listening to this podcast. Cameron and I have a lot invested in Halo Infinite. I personally want to see a wonderful success story. I really want it to be amazing. I was not nearly as picky about the stuff that they revealed way back last July, and so I'm really excited. I mean, when they gave us those 4K renders of in-game footage during, I think, PvP maps, I was like, okay, I'm sold. Like, I really want this to be a success. If it crashes and burns, man, is it gonna hurt.
Just to put my money where my mouth is, Jake, and then we can move on. If Halo Infinite does not have a battle royale, I will personally buy Freddie a copy of Halo Infinite, but I won't need to because it's on Game Pass. So anyway, moving on. Freddie, if you don't have Game Pass, DM me. The pre-order bonus will make it happen.
That's why you should join our Discord, everybody. One, you can get called out live for 10 minutes at the beginning of an episode.
That's right.
And two, you might be able to get some Game Pass out of it.
Show feedback. We got to make it happen. But no, in all seriousness, Freddie, thanks for giving show feedback. We really appreciate it. Anyone else who listens, please just rip us to shreds, man. If our opinions are wrong, we want to hear about it.
Yeah, we'd love to hear it. Freddie knows we love him too. So
absolutely. Well, Jake, enough about that. Today we were talking about a very special video game. This is kind of a sort of a hidden gem of 2020, and that is Immortals Fenyx Rising from Ubisoft. Mm-hmm. Jake, tell everyone how we're going to talk about it.
We are going to break down our analysis into 4 very familiar categories. If you've been with us for a while, and if you're new, this is what we do. This is the bread and butter of this podcast. So the 4 categories are narrative, mechanics, gameplay loop, and finally, impact on the industry. So number 1, narrative, we talk about the story. We talk about what's happening. We talk about the characters, who's telling the story, why they're telling the story, what major themes are being discussed. A lot of times we'll discuss artistic style, whether or not we liked it. And we just talk about how that hits, if it hits home, if it's something that's really forgettable, or sort of what the deal is going on there. Number 2, mechanics. This type of a game, it's an open world, RPG game. We're going to talk a lot about combat. We're going to talk a lot about puzzles. And we're going to talk about sort of the systems in the game, how you progress, how you actually interact and fight with people. We'll be talking about how Immortals Fenyx Rising handles all of that. This is from Ubisoft, right? And so I think Ubisoft fans, you get a lot here of what you would expect, right? But we're going to talk about why or why that does not work in Immortals Fenyx Rising. Number 3, gameplay loop. Here we talk about the aspects of the game that are going to bring you back to it. Is this one of those games where you can play it for 15 minutes? Or is this one of those games where you want to spend 2-hour chunks at a time? Is this one of those games that you're going to put every other game on hold and come back to it because it's so engaging? So we're going to talk about the aspects of the game that are engaging, or maybe the aspects of the game that don't engage us, that might push us away to other games. Then finally, impact on the industry. Here we're going to talk about the game in bigger terms. We're going to zoom out, look at Immortals Fenyx Rising compared to other games that are coming out now, games that came out at the end of 2020, where it fits in all that, if people are going to pay attention to it, people are taking notes on it, or sort of what the future of the game is. So those are the 4 categories we are going to discuss, and we are going to begin now.
So Immortals Fenyx Rising, narrative. This is kind of a tough one to talk about with this game. I got to be honest. It's Jake, you might have to start here because I don't even know where to start on this one. I'm serious. You might have to break this down for me.
That's fine. That is totally fine. The narrative of this game, we'll just talk about the very basic plot points. So you play as Phoenix. You are shipwrecked on a tiny island that's part of the Golden Isle, which is sort of, where all the gods hang out, and these gods being the ancient Greek gods. And you are enlisted by Hermes, essentially, to you're kind of fulfilling a prophecy, you're kind of not, right? But essentially, a bunch of the gods have been taken captive by Typhon, a titan who's an enemy to the gods. He wants to change the world and rule it. Very familiar villain, motives there. And Hermes wants you to stop all that. So that's the basic of what's happening in this game. You go around this massive island, you discover new areas, you unlock the four divine beasts. I mean, the four gods who are locked away. And that's like the main plot of the game. Now, how this story is told is a little different, though, because you have Zeus and Prometheus, and they are talking to each other. And Prometheus is sort of telling the story of Phoenix to Zeus. So while you are playing, you are getting commentary from Zeus and Prometheus left and right, all
Right.
over the place. So that's one of the biggest narrative arcs, right? That there's something happening, and the game breaks the fourth wall several times. They'll reference the player or the fact that they're in a video game. And this back and forth between Zeus and Prometheus is loaded with humor. So it's meant to be very funny and very lighthearted, which I think is a really big departure from other open world games that we've discussed on this podcast or just in general. So that's the basic nuts and bolts of the narrative. Is that a good setup for you, Cameron?
That is, I just like, so I started this game over winter break, and I'm playing it with my daughter Afton. She likes watching. She sometimes jump around and shoot the bow and arrow and stuff. And
Okay.
And I'm just not paying enough attention to the story. I know it's some kind of like it's basically like vanilla Greek god storyline. Greek god is in peril because there's some sort of titan that's attacking the Greek gods or some sort of thing. I mean, this is the same thing in like God of War, right? It's some type of like gods at war with each other, and then you get involved, and that's kind of the same idea. But
yeah,
this narrative doesn't do much for me. I'll be honest. I think it got a lot of criticism from what I read in like critic reviews because of the banter back and forth, like you talked about, Jake, between Zeus and Prometheus, which happens throughout the game. You're going through the game and they're essentially commenting on what you're doing, like how great it is, or they're making fun of you, or they're making quips. Honestly, like that didn't bother me. There was actually a couple lines I actually thought were pretty funny. Like I laughed, out loud. Most of the time, it's so like in the background that I just don't even notice. I'm just playing. I'm just trying to complete a puzzle or whatever. Because the game is so organized and segmented in exactly the same way that Breath of the Wild is, right? Because this is a Breath of the Wild clone, and we're going to talk about that. Like, this is literally the best Breath of the Wild game of 2020. It's so segmented. Like, it's very clear what you're doing. At any given time, you're just exploring a chunk of the map where there's a statue where you've climbed up to the top and you've uncovered the area, and then you're completing all the little activities that you can do in the map. And there's various activities that you can do, which we'll talk about in a second. They're all the same across the different chunks. They don't really change. The puzzles like have slight modifications, but at that point, like, it's just you do the puzzles and then you do the last, and then you do whatever little quest line is there in the area for the god to change him from whatever he's been transformed to by Typhon to his true godly form, and then he shows up at the whole like center place where you do all your upgrades and crap like that. It's not, but it's not a narrative that narrative just exists to serve like just going and checking off a list. I mean, that's really what it is. This is a list checker game. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Mm-hmm. But that's all this narrative does, for me at least.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame, and when we do these episodes and I'm preparing for them, I really try my best to think of the game on its own merits.
Yeah.
But Immortals Fenyx Rising borrows, I guess, so much from Breath of the Wild that comparisons are just, I can't avoid them. Just like, so when I was thinking about the narrative, right? And, I made this really dry joke that you have to go find the four divine beasts. Well, That's Breath of the Wild. Here, you have to find four gods, and
Yep.
you have to save them from different dungeons, and the dungeons are puzzle filled. You know, so I mean, like the very basic narrative of okay, you have to rescue four people who are more powerful than you, and enlist them, to help you take down the big bad guy who wants to just rule the world for whatever reason. It's like that is copy and paste. Now, where it is different is in this banter narrative with
Right.
Zeus and Prometheus, right?
Yes.
That to me is very refreshing. I'm very glad that I have that going on
I would
here.
agree with that, actually. Yeah.
I like it because it's something like Breath of the Wild is fantastic, and I love that game. Don't get me wrong. But you really have to be in the mood to listen to nature sounds for a long time, right? And that's very much Red Dead Redemption 2, right? So having this chatter in the background, people joking and commenting about how you as the player are moving through this world, I think it's refreshing. I like it. Um, the thing is, though, with Breath of the Wild, you have very interactive villages. You can talk to people and you can pick up side quests that way. And some of the dialogue options there are really well written or even really funny, right? But here, the Golden Isle, the world that you're traversing, is so void of other interaction that if you didn't have Zeus and Prometheus commenting and helping progress the narrative and tell the story, it would be pretty quiet and it'd be pretty lonely, right? And so I think it's a plus overall. People have mixed feelings about the humor. I thought the humor was fine, but I also think that the humor, it's not like adult or mature per se, but like it's definitely like dad jokes. Like
Yeah.
they're this, so so I thought it worked for sure. But yeah, I think the narrative underneath that is quite bland, to be honest. So, but yeah, story's told really well. I do think Hermes, he's kind of like your, I don't know, tutorial man.
Right.
He explains how everything happens. I think he's kind of annoying, but I thought everybody else was fine.
Yeah. It like I've already forgotten like why I'm even doing the thing that I'm doing. I know I'm saving the gods, but I keep asking myself like why am I doing this again? And I think it has something to do with
Hmm.
all of your buddies getting turned to stone. Um,
Yeah, yeah, that's a thread that gets picked up much later.
right, and that thread gets picked up, and then that actually kind of throws a wrench in the story because that's kind of anyway. It's in Breath of the Wild and Zelda, right? Like your motivation is always very clear. Like you're
Yeah.
trying to destroy Ganon, and so that does give some a little bit like more urgency to like what's happening in the sense that like you can feel the presence of Ganon in the world and that it's dark and like you've got to go take him down. And here it's the same thing, but like you don't feel like if you go kill Typhon that you're going to save all these people and like save the kingdom. And that's
Right.
and you don't feel that for a couple of reasons. One, because that's not actually what you're doing in the story, but number two, because like you said, there's none of these little towns or little people that you interact with that like kind of flesh out the feeling or like the emotional impact of the world. Like none of that is really there.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's fine. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the Golden Isle is like a place for the gods to be, right?
Yeah.
And so it feels very removed from humanity in a lot of ways, despite there every now and then being like these human figures frozen, turned into stone, which is part of the opening narrative when you're shipwrecked. They make a big deal about your brother being turned to stone and you want to free him and the rest of your crew.
Right.
But the Golden Isle feels too isolated, really, compared to what's happening with the rest of humanity. And yeah, in Breath of the Wild, like for me when I was playing Breath of the Wild, I thought it was fascinating to be like, oh man, so this is how this town evolved 100 years being outside of Hyrule,
Right. Which is
outside
cool.
of the Hyrule
Yep.
Kingdom. And so you really get a sense of how that world is lived in because you see how communities have adapted and changed when their huge, governmental power was just wiped out. Whereas here in Golden Isle, it's like the gods are like, "Hey man, could you help us out here? We could really use it." And you're like, "Yeah, I mean, you guys have the power to turn my brother back into a human from stone. Let's see what we can do." And so yeah, like I'll just repeat what I said. I think the underlying narrative is relatively bland. I do think the commentary is interesting. And the last thing I'll say about the narrative here is that The character that actually has the most growth, like in character development, is Zeus. It's really fascinating, and I really don't want to get into story like spoilers, but after you complete each of, I I just call them divine beast dungeons, but after you complete, because that's what they are. But like,
Yeah.
okay, after you complete each dungeon, freeing a god and returning them to their true glorious self, you get a lot of insight about Zeus and how he feels about that god and how he's interacted with that god, throughout history. And then, uh, you know, after you complete all four of those, or something pretty big that happens. We won't get into the spoilers, but I would just say like Zeus and Prometheus actually are probably the two figures who you get to know best.
Jake, let's talk about mechanics. Because I think that's where this game shines big time
Yeah.
in a big way. Like everything this game does, it does in the service of mechanics, 100%. Like this is a video game if there ever was a video game. Like
Yep.
the whole thing is in service of doing video gamey stuff, like upgrading your equipment, getting gems, getting new outfits to wear, getting new armor, getting new weapons, getting coins so that you can upgrade your abilities. And there's a very defined set of tasks that you do to get those. So
Yeah.
when you unlock a region, vaults open up, and vaults are kind of the core like puzzle holding mechanic where you jump in these vaults, they're called, and you go to this magical like Greek mythological space world type of thing, and and you solve puzzles. And the puzzles, I think the puzzles deserve like their own little conversation because the puzzles are actually really quite good. And in fact, a lot of them I actually enjoy. Not all of them, mind you, but a lot of them I actually enjoyed a little bit more than Breath of the Wild. Even though Breath of the Wild has the amazing, obviously, like physics system, which is sort of unstoppable and is like one of the things that makes it so fantastic. But I was actually pleasantly surprised at how good I thought the puzzles were. Most of them involve pressure plates. Yes, that is a valid criticism that critics have talked about a lot. But I was actually genuinely surprised and pleased at like the variety of the different challenges that you found in the puzzles and the different types of ways that things that you had to solve. Sometimes it's fighting beasts. Sometimes it's you know using your like strength power to move a boulder around or like manipulate wind, or there's just a variety of different things. And I was actually shocked at how deep like the puzzle mechanic went in this game. I think it's a huge part of the game.
Oh man, puzzles are a massive part of this game, and I think that's sort of something that maybe I don't know if it's a marketing thing or just like people's expectations about what type of game this is or should be. But there are lots and lots of puzzles. You have puzzles in the overworld, that you complete to earn certain currencies. When you go into I was gonna call them shrines, whatever they're called, rifts. I think
You can't
you know
help but like think of the Zelda name. Yeah.
it's like all the Zelda terminology is already in my brain, and the terminology that they introduce to you, like, isn't repeated enough to hammer out what I've learned in Breath of the Wild. So that's just what I think of everything,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Yep.
Anyway, I'm pretty sure it's called a rift. Anyway, those puzzles, I mean, they're mostly puzzles. I mean, combat, it's kind of strange because like combat is such a central part of this game, but puzzles are like another massive part of this game, and I was not expecting that at all.
Right.
Puzzle variety, yeah, I'm with you, Cameron. I think some of them are pretty interesting for sure. You have abilities, and you're right, Cameron, not quite as robust, especially in terms of the physics with what you have in Breath of the Wild and the Sheikah Slate. But I mean, you do things, they're interesting. For me, though, the puzzles got a little repetitive. I'll be honest, and
Yeah,
I
I
kind of
agree.
stopped. I kind of stopped shrine rift hunting after a while because I was just like, you know what? I kind of get a sense of what's going on here. But some of them do really shine. Like they'll stick to a theme,
Right.
and that theme will play out really well, and it'll build over time. There was one. What was it? Shoot, I can't remember if this. Maybe this was the boss dungeon. The boss dungeon puzzles I thought were awesome, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
They put extra effort into that, obviously, and I think it really paid off. I think this was a boss one, but you have two boxes tethered to each other, like a small box and then a giant box. And you can only pick up the small box, and so you had to swing the big box around, and you had to move them to different pressure plates, right? But the way that they had you move them and manipulate them, and there's a lot of verticality. You had to move some of these boxes up really high, so you had to stack them on top of each other
Yep.
to reach different areas. I was really impressed. I was like, wow, they took this really simple idea, which is let's tether two boxes together, and they really ran with it. So I think like the main dungeons, like super well done. When it came to exploring different rifts just around the map, I got tired of it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm about 50% through the game, and I've reached puzzle fatigue. Like you said, Jake, I've kind of stopped going to vaults, and I'm kind of like trying to weave my way, like the fastest way to just finishing the quest objectives, which
Vault, that's what they're called.
they're called vaults. Yeah, I think they're called like Tartarus Vault or something. Anyway,
Yeah. Okay.
Vaults of Tartarus. Yeah, I mean they're good, but they're not Breath of the Wild good. And I apologize because you have to make the comparison to Breath of the Wild. And you know what? I think the game deserves to be compared to it because it copies it so explicitly that it's asking to be compared to it. Like I just think it is, and I think that's completely fine. I think they had to have known, Ubisoft had to have known that. Look, this is what they're doing, and actually, what's surprising is aside from Genshin Impact, which I don't even think is really a Breath of the Wild clone, other than the look and feel compared to this. This is a true, hey, we took the gameplay loop and the mechanics of this game that was made by Nintendo that kind of took the world by storm and like changed what open world kind of gaming meant. And we took the exact template that was created and built our own game within that. And that's what Ubisoft has done here. And I think, they were largely successful. Did they build a game at the caliber of Breath of the Wild? No, they didn't. But they made a game that's fun to play, that's enjoyable. We already talked about puzzle. I think combat is one of the places where I think this game probably in at least one aspect stands above Breath of the Wild. I think the combat is actually pretty phenomenal in my opinion. I actually really enjoyed it. It's a combination of light and heavy attacks. There's a myriad of abilities that can use. There's a giant hammer. There's like the spear move where you kind of power up and then you shoot up in the air with a whole bunch of spears and then that stuns people. There's a stun meter on enemies. There's a lot of actually really challenging bosses that you fight. Like some of the boss battles, I was actually genuinely shocked at how challenging some of the fights were. Like the first boss of the first area. That actually took me a couple tries to beat. Like I got killed a couple times. Like it was actually pretty challenging. This isn't Sekiro, right? But but no, I think combat in this game actually is really, really well done. I think they took huge notes from Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Assassin's Creed Origins. You can feel that major notes from that. But obviously added their own spin. I think there's a lot more verticality. Obviously, Fenyx has wings, right? So like she can jump super high. You can glide. You can do moves in the air like when you're fighting. But I think mechanically this game it's well done. I think the mechanics are executed well. The puzzles are good. The various different little activities that you do around the map, there's only like 5 or 6 iterations of them. There's not that many. They all repeat over the different areas. They're just kind of slightly different. If you like those, you like them. If you don't like them, you don't like them. I think I got kind of sick of them, but again, video games are just too long, man. It's just I don't think it's really the mechanics' fault. It's just games are too long. That's the bottom line.
Games are very long. I'll have something to say more about that in our final category, but just my thoughts on combat here. So when we did our open world episode, I talked about my favorite part of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which is the abilities system. I loved the variety of abilities, how you could really feel the impact. You could feel the perks happening. You could create really cool, fun builds around poison, around, assassinating people, stealth attacks, whatever it is, right? And I would say that Immortals Fenyx Rising kind of has like this distilled version of Assassin's Creed Odyssey's abilities system, where There's really only one type of build, and well, there's more than one, but I would say so much of combat focuses around the stun meter. So, like Cameron says, everybody has a stun meter. You whittle that down, and then you get a bunch of free cheap shots while they're stunned, right?
Right.
And a lot of the abilities are built around stunning and staggering people. And as you know, longtime listeners have heard me say, I love that type of build. And so I had a ton of fun in this game because you just stun people left and right to your heart's content. Um, there's your heavy attack and your light attack. This is where different builds sort of come into play. I was talking to our friend Rob, who's been on the show with the Nier Automata episode,
Right.
and he built his character and his weapons and everything around using light attacks, and I built mine around heavy attacks because
Got it.
heavy attacks can give you massive stun. And so we've been playing the game differently, and I'm glad that that variety is in there. So I think combat is really fun. There's a lot of verticality to this game. Anybody playing this game, there is an ability where you can pull yourself to a flying opponent and then hit them. And I highly, highly recommend you unlock that ability fast, like early
Yes.
on,
Yes.
because there's so many griffins in the air and you can get easily frustrated. So once
Right.
that ability's open, though, you're good. So yeah, combat I think is a lot of fun. Some of the systems there, I actually really like this system. It was like a more simplified version than Assassin's Creed or a lot of open world games, where weapons are much more cosmetic than you might think they are. Each weapon has like two different perks that you can unlock, and you level up your weapon type. You level up your light attack to be able to do more damage no matter what light attack weapon you have equipped. And then your weapon is going to have different perks on it, and so that's how you create builds.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that was really cool. And it's the same thing for armor. Like if you want to up your defense, you can get helmets and you can get body armor. And you can spend currencies to boost your helmet defense. And so it doesn't matter which helmet you're wearing, all of your helmet defense will go up. And then the only thing that varies are the perks that are associated with helmet. And so I I love that actually. I loved how much more simple that is than other games. And just being able to create builds that way was so much less frustrating. So I thought that was a really cool system that they implemented in there. Sometimes simple is just the way to go, and I think that's one thing that I loved about Immortals Fenyx Rising's mechanics is that they kind of simplified things, but it worked. My only complaint I think with combat would be enemy attack variety. Bosses have awesome variety, but like just your grunt and bigger just enemies that are roaming the world or that are in dungeons, not a ton of variety in how they attack you, so you can kind of approach every scenario the same way. But combat otherwise is fun.
100% agree, Jake. Let's talk about the gameplay loop. So we've already described the design of this game as a carbon copy of Breath of the Wild, and the loop there is, I mean, it's built right into the game. It's that's a stupid thing to say. It's the story of the game is designed around the gameplay loop. That's what I meant to say.
There we go.
It's
very elegant.
A little bit better way to say it, I think. But I mean, every game the gameplay loop is built into the game. Come on, Jake. So anyway, so that if you haven't played Breath of the Wild, it's giant area with a big tower, a big boss with a dungeon, and then a bunch of activities to do in the area, and that's the loop. You go to the area, you complete a bunch of activities, you get some loot, you kill some dudes, you solve a few puzzles, you kill the boss, you go to the next area. That's the loop. It's like 60-hour long loop, 50-hour long loop or something. I believe there's 4 areas, or is there a fifth? I see there might be a fifth on the map. I haven't gotten all the way through this game, Jake, so
There is a fifth, but we won't talk about it.
Okay. No spoilers. So anyway, there's these areas, and then obviously once you do all that, then supposedly you would go to the final boss, and that's exactly how this game works. So
yep.
I think this works. I mean, it's again, this is a Breath of the Wild clone, and they cloned it for a reason. It's because it's a really smart design. It makes a lot of sense. It makes, I think, from a development standpoint, I'm sure it really helps like organizing like, okay, how are we going to build this game? How are we going to put it together? Okay, this team is going to do this area and this
Right.
team is going to do this area. I don't know if this is how they did it, but I'm just guessing, right? Like you could assign like entire chunks of teams to create assets for a specific area and create different types of puzzles. You give them all the same tool sets and then they just go and they just create stuff, right? And
Yep.
I think this loop is perfectly set up for that type of design, and there's a reason that companies are copying it. I mean, this is really the first true Breath of the Wild copy, like verbatim copy that we've seen, and I actually think we'll see more copies of Breath of the Wild. We'll see if they can update the formula at all in interesting ways, or if it'll just continue to be the exact same formula. Which, I mean, if the games are good, then why not?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I would say, I mean, I agree with you, right? The gameplay loop it's what you would expect from an open world game like this, honestly. But I will say, I don't think it's a narrative that's making you come back.
No.
And exploring is like, I think you're going to come back to this game and explore more of the Golden Isle if you really want to upgrade your gear. Like if you really want to search for the different currencies that are all over the map to upgrade your gear, upgrade your abilities, etc., then you're going to come back to this game. Like if you really enjoy the different vaults, I had to think of it.
Yep.
If you enjoy the vaults, if you enjoy that, then you're going to come back to this game for sure, I think. Now, as I mentioned when we talk about narrative, if you want to explore to learn more about this world that you're in, you're not going to come back to this game. It'll be pretty easy to fall off, right? Like if you're looking for something like really interesting about why this area of the map looks this way, you're not going to get it. If you're looking for like, oh, tell me more about this random thing that I saw, you're not going to get it, right? There's no lore or or like deep history in this game that you're going to be searching for. So, but I will say for me, it was really hard for me to keep playing this game, not because it's a bad game. It's a good game. But this game released like what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks after Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
Right.
And if you are experiencing open world fatigue, do not start this game. I think this would be like, it is so hard for me to get back into this game, and it's such a shame. I mean, and this game has been delayed twice. It was originally supposed to release like March 2020 and then summer 2020, and then it got finally released fall 2020. Had this game come out at either those earlier release dates, man, I would have just powered through this game, right?
Terrible release date.
Such a terrible, terrible release date. And so I hate saying this, but like, if you're at all interested in this game, but you know that you're kind of fatigued with games that rely heavily on exploration and just open world elements, maybe wait a little bit.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's not quite about gameplay loop, but just my own experience. Like after hitting halfway through the game just died for me. And I was like, man, it's going to be really hard to finish this game. It's going to be really hard to go to the next 2 dungeons because I already know what to expect. You could do the dungeons in any order, which means that there's a certain, evenness to how each of the areas and dungeons are going to be. And so if you've done 2 of them and you're already fatigued with open world games, drop off. You just drop off. It's a shame.
Yeah, it's a terrible release date. They should have come out in March 2021. To be honest, I think that would have been a perfect time for it. I don't think there's anything else coming in March. It would have just dropped and been by itself. This big open world game from Ubisoft, like it would have been the only thing that people were talking about. And I think it did get good critic reviews, but not great. And that definitely hurt it sales wise. I do think if this comes out in March 2021, I think the critic reviews are better because they don't have anything else to compare it to. They didn't just get off 120-hour Assassin's Creed Valhalla and then have to jump on this game in December. AC Valhalla comes out in November, then they got to jump on this game in December. Like, if you're a game reviewer, you're going to be like pretty fatigued. You don't think that's going to seep into your review? It definitely is. Like, that score is going to go down for sure. Obviously, there's business things to consider. This game, like you said, Jake, had been delayed twice. I'm sure they were trying to get it out for fiscal 2022 quarterly
Yeah.
earnings or whatever, right? Like you don't. I think Ubisoft's. I'm pretty sure they're a publicly traded company. I can't remember if they're private or public. I should probably know that. Um, I have to look that up now. It's gonna bug me.
Um, yeah. I was gonna say.
Yes, it is public. It's publicly.
It.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So it is. Yeah. This game though is highly polished. Like they use
Yes.
the time
Yes.
in the delays. Like I don't think I encountered any bugs, at all, which is kind of rare for any AAA release these days. So if you want an experience where you could just play the game, this is a good one.
So I'll tell you what happened, Jake, with this game. To your point on like you got 50% of the way through and it's going to be tough for you to come back. I had the same thing happen, and what I did is I went back to Valhalla, and immediately Valhalla was like, oh my gosh, like look at this like crazy immersive like old English like world that they've put together. I mean, this is incredible.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing that, and I'm still pushing through Valhalla, and I'm actually surprised at myself. I've got 30 hours in Valhalla. I still have like 978 hours to go. But no,
Yeah,
when I was playing playing Immortals, really enjoying it, but then went back to Valhalla, I think the mechanics in a lot of ways in Immortals are actually more fun than Valhalla. I think they're better. But because Valhalla is so immersive, because exploration is more rewarding, because the world is so much more like feels so much more alive, and there's villages and there's like Roman ruins and there's all this stuff. It's like, for me, that was like coming up, from underwater and like breathing air for the first time. It was kind of what it felt like, to be honest. Like to be the mechanics, no, they're not as tight. Combat's like not quite as tight. It's not quite as snappy. There's no puzzles really to speak of. There's the super annoying, and we're gonna do a whole episode on Valhalla, right? We'll talk about all this, but
yeah, we'll talk about
this
it.
is just something that I noticed with this game, and I think that's, if there's one big criticism that I have against Immortals, it's that just the immersion is not there. Mechanically, it's very solid, but the immersion is just not there. You don't always have to have immersion, and I think a lot of people are gonna get a lot of value out of this game. It's a good video game. But yeah, I think that's my only complaint.
Yeah, and Cameron, I texted you this. My biggest complaint about Immortals Fenyx Rising is a really stupid, nitpicky thing. And this is something that I saw massive contrast with, because I've gone back to Assassin's Creed Valhalla as well. In Immortals Fenyx Rising, I really hate the landscape. and this is really dumb. Like, this is a very dumb complaint. But I really prefer the natural geography of Breath of the Wild, of The Witcher 3, of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, of Red Dead Redemption 2, over what we have going on here in the Golden Isle of Immortals Fenyx Rising. I mean, they've built verticality into this game in very unnatural ways, and it almost just feels like it's there just to force you to climb a few cliffs to get to something. And it takes 3 extra minutes, and it's just annoying. Like, I really dislike the verticality in the landscape of this game. And what I mean by that, everybody, is if you open up the game and you look at it, there are cliffs everywhere. And to get from point A to point B, you're like, man, I'm going to have to like jump over this massive chasm. I'm going to have to climb this giant mountain, and I'm going to have to climb it straight up. Whereas in like the games that I mentioned, even like Witcher 3, which kind of had janky mountains, but like going up, like the verticality just feels so much more natural and so much more. I mean, natural is the word I keep coming back to, but I just very much prefer these beautiful, natural geographies in open world games, because in Immortals Fenyx Rising, coming up to yet another cliff really just felt like a roadblock. So I really disliked traversal in this game. You can hop on your mount, but then you're going to have to hop off your mount relatively quickly because your mount can't fly over this gap or whatever it is. So that's my one big criticism of the game. And it's very, I think, unique to me, but just something to keep in mind, I guess.
Yeah, I think, Jake, and I think this moves us straight to discussion on this game's impact on the industry. I think. Whoops, just hit my desk there. Excuse the mic reverberation. Anyway, I think open world games need immersion.
Yeah.
To be like truly successful. I think that is the appeal of open world, right? When you say open world and you're creating an open world game, the idea is to immerse somebody into a totally different world. I don't feel that with Immortals. I feel the mechanics are good. You run around and you do stuff, but there's nothing for me. Like there's no exploration. There's no people to talk to. There's no like little side quest. There's not even really any little side quests to go do like with people on the map. Like it's just completely lacking in terms of the immersion. And I think if there's lessons to be taken away, depending on how this game performs financially, which I'm going to go ahead and venture to guess that it's probably not going to do very well. I don't think it was marketed exceptionally well. It was released at a horrible time, like we've already talked about. It didn't get very high critical ratings. And so I suspect that the game is not going to do very well commercially. And so if you take lessons from that, I think one of the lessons that developers should probably take is just the lack of immersion. I don't think it works. Now, some people are going to disagree. I know, for example, Skill Up, huge video game YouTuber, huge. Yeah. He does tons of reviews. He does hour-long reviews on these games, right? He absolutely hates Assassin's Creed Valhalla. He hates it.
Really?
At the end of the review, he says, and I don't have the exact quote here, but he's basically like, that was a complete, every hour of that game was a waste of my time.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was brutal. Whereas with Immortals Fenyx Rising, he was praising it. He thought it was fantastic. And I think that just comes down to, taste, right? I think the immersion in Valhalla is actually pretty fantastic. I think it's pretty great. Whereas with Immortals, because it doesn't have that, even though the mechanics might be slightly better, it just falls off the map for me. And that's my biggest takeaway. And the other takeaway I think has to do with Breath of the Wild clones. Are people going to see this and they're going to go, somebody already did it. We don't really need to do it. You got to think at least one or two other of these games are in development by somebody.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be interesting to see what does the Breath of the Wild look like moving forward. And more importantly, what does Breath of the Wild 2 do to make that formula? Or is it the exact same formula? I mean, honestly, if Breath of the Wild 2, this is a totally separate conversation, but if it was the exact same formula, but it was like new stuff to explore, I think 99% of people would be ecstatic. But you have to think they're probably going to try and push the envelope a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, I think my takeaways in terms of impact on the industry with Immortals Fenyx Rising are the following. I think people will look at this game and they'll see, that's how we can make a game like Breath of the Wild, right? Ubisoft has done it, right? It's a good game, and people are going to be taking notes about how that reception happens, right? Or how that reception has happened and how they can design a similar game. Now, Cameron, this game has like 3 DLC packs planned for it. And the first one,
it's an Ubisoft model. It's the same with Valhalla. All these games, they have, season pass type thing.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, and you have access, I think, to a demo mission just when you own the base game of Immortals Fenyx Rising. You go back to, I think it's Olympus, where the shipwreck was, and you can play through it. So clearly, Ubisoft is trying to do something with this IP, and I think that's fantastic. Recently in video game news, we've gotten a lot of info on studios taking on very well-established film IPs, right? We know there's more stuff coming with Star Wars. We know there's stuff that's coming with Indiana Jones. Today, it was announced that Lord of the Rings Gollum game is delayed into 2022, right? And so we see a lot of people leaning back on existing IPs, right, to create these AAA games. So for me, I think it's really cool to see Ubisoft create a brand new IP. And this is something that I think other AAA studios, I hope they're taking note of like, okay, well, let's, instead of releasing Far Cry 10, I guess that's Ubisoft also, right? But you know what I mean? Like, let's come up with some new IPs, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I really hope that people are taking from this is like, hey, we can do new IPs. Yeah, we've done that before. We could do that again. But yeah, I think in terms of open world games, my definitive conclusion of Immortals Fenyx Rising is that this is the only open world game I feel like in recent times that would actually be a fantastic like starter open world game. Like maybe you have your kid or your niece or nephew is like 14 and they want to get into these like super involved really long games. Let's be honest, they're probably 9, right? Because as 9-year-olds people are playing Final Fantasy, right? But anyway, and you want to introduce them into that type of combat and gameplay, get them Immortals Fenyx Rising, right?
Yeah.
I think it's an excellent introduction into that type of genre and those types of games. And so I would love to see more of that in the industry where it's like you take an established genre type and then you package a game that belongs to that, but really is a good way of introducing people to how those types of games function.
Yeah, I mean, I got to hand it to Ubisoft. I mean, they get a lot of crap, and they have some pretty serious problems with culture that have been in the news over the past 6 months in terms of sexual harassment, and there's a lot of things going on there. But yeah, I mean, they made a brand new IP and they made an open world game out of it. I mean, that's applaudable. I wish more companies would do that. Like, be creative. I think the more creative you let creators be, and I think people know this, but it's hard for executives to kind of, you sit back and you see all the dollar signs of these massive like licenses, right? And so you go out and you get, and don't get me wrong, I'd love to see as many Star Wars games as possible, but but I think the more creative you let these teams be, these artists be, I think the better game you get. And you can tell when executives have pushed their hands in like too far. I for one think, in terms of what you're saying about this being like a starter open world, I think you cut the game time of this in half, and it's. I mean, I'd give it a full point. I think critics would give it a full point back. You cut the time in half. I think we got to make games shorter, Jake. Make them shorter.
Cameron, it's just funny that you say that because this game is like time cut in half from other open world games.
I know, but right? I think Valhalla should be the same length as this, and I think this should be half of that. So
Valhalla is too long for sure.
Valhalla is just, video games are too long. They need to make them shorter. They don't need to make them. I think you want to save the development industry from complete and total collapse because everyone's getting a divorce and everyone's like lives are being crushed by crunch and all this crap that's going on. Just cut video games in half. Cut the lengths down. We don't need 120-hour open world RPGs. 60 hours is fine. Even that's too long.
Yeah.
Anyway, rant over. But Immortals Fenyx Rising, good game, good video game. Check it out. It's probably like $25. I got to be honest. Like, it's going to be on sale forever.
I mean, I bought it for $30, and that was weeks ago, at least a month ago.
2 weeks after release, it was $30. It'll probably be lower than that. So there's no reason not to check this out. If one of my predictions comes true, this will be on Game Pass soon. So
could be. Yep. Yeah, I would say definitely for this game. If you have anybody in your life who's remotely interested in open world games, kid, niece, nephew, whoever it is, buy this game for them. I think it'll be really fantastic. And it's funny because it is like 35 hours long, but that's on the short side of things. But hey, like I said, like how many kids, Cameron, did you know, or you, Cameron, yourself, like play through Final Fantasy VII when that came out? And that game's like 1 billion years long.
I mean, let's not put this in the same category as Final Fantasy VII, Jake. Come on. This is...
Well, and JRPGs tend to be longer anyway, right?
I mean, that's an interesting. I don't know. What are kids? The kids are just playing Fortnite now. They don't have any like real taste in the artistry of video games.
Ooh, Cameron coming in hot at the very end of the episode.
No, I don't know.
Stuck around.
If you stuck around this long, you get the hot takes at the very end. But no, we can talk about Gen Z and video games. This is actually a pretty interesting topic, but we'll save that for another time. Jake, any other comments on Immortals Fenyx Rising?
Good game. Good game.
You heard it here first, folks. Good game from Jacob.
It's all around, bro.
That's right. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of the Pre-Order Bonus. Please follow us. Me at Cam Warren M. Jake at Jacob_ChipDip18. You can follow the podcast at PreorderCast. Subscribe to us Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. And come to our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel, we're branding it up a little bit. Our YouTube channel is Mass Generic Gaming. We're getting some branding done. We're getting a new intro done, but pre-order bonus is going to be part of all that. So check us out wherever you're at. Thank you to everybody, and have a great night.